Hey, we're going to read chapter 10 of Sam's Over, the Sea Monster. Enjoy. The octopode gave a shudder as the drill began to bite into the sea wolf's timbers. Faster, Septimus shrieked at his henchman, who panted as they strained to turn the crank. He whirled round to stare eagerly through the window. I want to see the water pouring into that hole. Blade would not escape me twice. Sam knew that he had to take his chance while Septimus had his back to him. Ducking low, he swiftly unbuckled Captain Trebennick's shackles. Then he released the others. They looked exhausted but couldn't hide the sudden hope on their faces. Sam had to think quickly. The 6 of them might be more than a match for the puny Septimus grind, but after the grueling work and lack of food, the men of the trio would have a hard fight against Grind's brawny henchmen. Sam quickly scanned the cabin. There was nothing they could use as weapons. They'd have to take the villains by surprise. He signalled for the men to make for the steps. That was hard. Fernando was watching silently. He mimed a high five at Sam. "We'll split up and take 1 brute each," ordered Captain Trebennick in a low voice. 3 to each man should be enough. We can deal with that little squirt afterwards. "Miserable sprat," came a muffled squawk from Crow. Sam could feel him under his jerkin, clinging to his belt. He hoped that the parrot had sense to stay there. Septimus's hands were spread over the window, and his nose was pressed against the glass like a toddler gazing into a sweet shop. Soon that vessel will be at the bottom of the sea, and every man drowned. "Turn that lever harder. I want to see the drill cutting into the wood." No one had noticed the prisoners creeping up the stairs. Sam's heart was beating painfully hard. Time was running out. A few more turns of the drill and the water would start gushing out into the sea wolf. Captain Trebennick led his group towards Fry. Sam and the others made for Cratchit. As the brute began to straighten, ready for another turn of the crank, Sam tapped him on the back. The henchman spun around, gave a gasp of surprise, and swung a punch at him. Sam ducked, and the force of the swing sent Cratchit tumbling over Sam to land with a thump on the planks of the foredeck. Sam could hear Fry cursing as the 3 attackers held him and bound him with their bandanas. Septimus cowered away in terror. "Help!" shrieked. "Mutiny!" Cratchit was struggling to his feet. Sam leapt onto his back and clamped his hands over his eyes. Cratchit thrashed about blindly, clawing at Sam's fingers. Now Sam's team joined in, punching and kicking furiously. With a bellow of rage, the guard shook Sam off, flinging him down the steps to the hard deck below. Crow flapped out from Sam's jerkin with a frightened squawk. Cool little picture of them beating each other up. Sam lay there trying to catch his breath. He could see that Cratchit had pulled his whip from his belt and was lashing at his attackers. The 2 men backed away to avoid painful stings. "Well done, Cratchit," squeaked Septimus. He grasped the crank and tried to turn it. "No, keep them away while I finish the job." "That won't be a problem," snarled Cratchit, letting the whip swish around the floor. They were not venturing in the cat o' nine tails. Suddenly the air was full of ear-splitting squawks. Crow hadn't forgotten being half-throttled. He was coming for his revenge. Cratchit dropped the whip and drew a knife from his belt. The 5 trio men began edging towards him. Sam leapt up to join them, but Cratchit was slashing the air with his knife, keeping his attackers at bay. Crow gave a screech and flapped away to cling to the periscope. No one could get near the vicious guard. Then Sam spotted the whip line on the ground. He threw himself down as if in the terror of the knife, waited for his moment, and snatched it up. He had no idea how to use it, but it couldn't be that hard. He'd seen it in films loads of times. The hero always managed to pull the villain's gun or knife from his hand with a whip. He tried to give it a crack with a flick of his wrist, but his palm was damp with sweat, and the whip just curled feebly in the air. Cratchit laughed. "You silly, weak boy," he snarled. "You can't get the better of me." He raised his knife over his head and lunged at Sam. In terror, Sam lashed out. As Cratchit gave a cry of triumph, the leather thongs caught around his knees. Sam jerked the whip hard and Cratchit crashed to the deck next to Fry, his legs bound together. Before he could move, the men of the trio had him trussed up, with his own belt and neckerchief. Fernando and the prisoners in the brig gave a big cheer. Sam pulled the whip free and advanced on Septimus, who was cowering behind the wheel. "Mr. Grind," called Sam, flicking the cat-o'-nine-tails with a satisfying crack. He was getting the hang of it now. "Your men are a bit tied up, so we're giving you the orders." "It's Captain Grind to you," hissed Septimus defiantly, "and no one gives me orders." "I think you'll listen to us," said Sam. He cracked the whip again. Septimus let out a squeal of fear. "The first thing you will do is get that drill out of my ship's hull." "But it hasn't cut through yet," wailed Septimus. "Just another couple of turns." He looked around at the grim faces of the men advancing on him and sighed. "Very well," he said at last. "I will do as you say. After all, I have no choice." "We can't trust him," snarled George Lydgate. He pushed Septimus aside and cranked the handle in the opposite direction. To Sam's huge relief, the drill began to slide backwards towards the octopode. The Sea-Wolf's timbers were splintered, but there was no hole. "Now, make those grapples release the Sea-Wolf," Sam demanded. Without a word, Septimus pulled on the levers. They all saw the arms unclamp and felt the underwater craft float free. "Step away from the wheel," ordered Captain Trebennick. "As you wish," said Septimus meekly. Sam was struggling to keep the grin from his face. He'd saved the Sea-Wolf. Now all he had to do was set the prisoners in the brig free and get his weird submarine up to the surface. Septimus had slumped over his controls, his cheek resting on the golden octopus in the middle. His shoulders were shaking. He must be crying over his miserable defeat. He almost felt sorry for him. But then he realised with a jolt that the man wasn't crying. He was laughing. With a wild shriek of delight, Septimus threw back his head and seized the golden octopus in both hands. Before Sam could stop him, he twisted violently around. At once, Sam heard the ominous sound of rushing water. I can't stop yawning. Every time I read, I yawn. Chapter 11. Have a quick drink. Chapter 11. "Surely you didn't expect me to give in that easily," shrieked Septimus. "I have just set in motion my dreaded dial of doom." Slits had appeared in the walls of the octopode, and water was beginning to stream down into the cavern. One twist of my wonderful dial, and the octopode has opened its gills to let in the ocean. "It won't be long before you all drown," sniggered the mad inventor. The water was creeping across the lower deck. Sam pushed Septimus aside and tried to twist the golden octopus back. It didn't move. "Don't bother," the mad inventor told him. "I've designed it only to work one way. It's very simple. The octopode will fill, and then it will sink." He opened a hatch at his feet. Sam glimpsed a small barrel-shaped craft in the chamber under the foredeck. "I have my escape pod ready," Septimus told him with glee. "It's already loaded with my treasure." "But I won't let you go," said Sam desperately. "Get us up to the surface and open the hatch." He held the whip ready to strike and stood between Grind and the escape hatch. A cunning look came over Septimus's face. "The lower deck is filling up fast, and the brig has a very low ceiling," he told Sam. "Even if I do as you say, your incarcerated friends will have drowned long before we reach the surface." "Then give me the key to the prison," demanded Sam. Septimus took it from his belt and looked at it thoughtfully. "Let me go, and it's yours. It's your only chance to rescue your friends. If you try to take it from me, I will drop down into my hatch, and you'll never get it." Sam knew there was no time to argue. The men in the brig were calling desperately for help. "Agreed," he said, reaching out to take the key. Quick as a flash, Septimus threw it over Sam's head. Sam tried to catch it, but it disappeared into the steadily rising water on the deck below. He hurtled down the steps after it and heard the hatch close behind him. The villain had got away, but Sam didn't have time to worry about that. He had to find the key and release the others before they perished. He dropped onto all fours to search. It was still too dark to see anything, and the only thing he could feel was the rough wood of the floor. Captain Trebennick and his crew came bounding down the foredeck steps and waded across to help. The water swelled about their knees. Sam caught sight of Fernando's anxious face at the bars. It wouldn't be long before the little cell was completely engulfed. "Treasure hunt!" squawked Crow, fluttering above Sam's head. "Come on, my friend," shouted Fernando. "You can do it." "We've got to be quick," cried George. "This craft is sinking fast with the extra weight of the water in here." But there's no sign of the key, Sam said desperately. He swept his hands around in wide arcs, but his fingers felt nothing. Keep calm, he muttered to himself. It's here somewhere. He crawled further along. Suddenly he let out a yelp as he knelt on something hard. His fingers curled around it. It was the key. Sam jumped to his feet, splashed over the cell door, and unlocked it. Fernando burst out of his cramped prison and raced up to the foredeck, making straight for Fry. I'll be having this, he said grimly, as he took his knife back. Man the capstan, cried Sam, scrambling up the steps after Fernando. We've got to make it for the surface. He pulled the wheel towards him, as he'd seen Septimus do. Thank goodness he reached level 27 of Flight Simulator. His mother always moaned that he spent too long in that game. Little did she know how useful it would have turned out to be. The octopode suddenly tilted. Sam steered the vessel up beside the Seawolf's hull. Fernando joined the 10 men from the trio as they took hold of the capstan bars and began to push. The water was up to their waists now. We can hardly move, shouted Fernando. The craft's heavier with that flood coming through the gills. We need more power, said Captain Trebennick. Fernando nodded at the henchmen lying bound on the foredeck. I say we untie them. Aye, puffed George Lydgate. They're strong, and they've not been slaving like us. We know that to our cost. Can we trust them, though? Asked one of his shipmates. We'll do whatever you say, said gabbled Cratchit. Just don't let us drown. Fernando sliced through their bonds. The henchmen threw themselves into the capstan and the craft began to move. Sam held the wheel steady. We're nearly there, he called. Keep going. But the water seemed to be rising faster now. Sam could see Fernando struggling to keep his head above the surface. He wanted to dive down and rescue him, but he knew that they'd be lost if they'd stopped steering. We're going to die, whimpered Fry. Sam gave a sudden shout. I can see daylight. As the octopode broke through the waves, the snarling wolf figurehead of the Seawolf came into view. Captain Trebennick held Cratchit's knife to his throat. How do we open the jaws of this thing? Cratchit nodded fearfully towards the foredeck. The boy can do it. The lever's on the side of the wheel. Sam seized the lever and pulled. With a grinding clunk, the jaws of the hatch began to open. The truer men abandoned the capstan and swam frantically to the rope ladder that hung down from the hatch, eager to climb up and squeeze through the slowly widening gap, yelping with fear. Cratchit and Fry splashed after them. George Lydgate led the way up as he scrambled to the opening. He had just reached the top when something whistled past his head and struck the body of the octopode, sending splinters flying. Everyone tumbled back down the ladder in terror. Sam's hand froze on the lever. They think we're the monster, he yelled. They're shooting at us. Chapter 12. I'll show myself, declared Fernando. They won't fire on a shipmate. Captain Trebennick looked up. The octopode was being peppered with shot. You'll be dead before they realise who you are. We'll be dead if we stay here, said George Lydgate. We've got no choice, insisted Fernando. We're just lucky we're too close for them to use the cannon. Get those jaws wide open, Sam. There was a determined squawk, and suddenly Crow flew past Fernando and zoomed out of the octopode. Abandon ship, he shrieked. Hold your fire, came a distant shout. That's Crow. Who else will still be alive in that beast? Friend or foe? Friend, yelled Fernando, climbing out onto the top of the octopode and waving frantically. Sam's here too, and there are others. We're all very glad to see you. They're alive, came Charlie's cry. And that's how we wish to say, called Captain Trebennick, ushering his men up the ladder. Sam wanted to whoop with joy. Everyone was safe. There was just him to go now. He was about to swim over to the escape ladder when a movement through the window caught his eye. Something was feebly splashing around. Had one of the trio men fallen into the sea? Excuse me. He seized the periscope and peered into the small eye-hole. A little barrel-shaped craft with two spindly arms was paddling around in circles not far from the octopode. It was Septimus in his escape pod. Apparently he couldn't steer it. Sam wasn't going to let him escape again. Fernando poked his head down through the jaws. Come on, he called. Time to go. I'll be there in a minute, Sam replied. I've got one last job to do here. Be quick, Fernando sounded anxious. The octopode's sinking again. The sea will be coming in through the hatch soon. Sam knew that he didn't have long. The water below had now reached the foredeck, and it was lapping over his feet. He grabbed the levers that operated the giant claw, the claw that plucked him and Fernando from the sea wolf. He realised that they'd worked like a game on the pier in the backwater bay where you operated a crane to win a toy. This claw was much harder to manoeuvre, but finally he got it swinging across the surface of the ocean towards Septimus's barrel. He opened the claw and positioned it above the mini octopode. The Weasley inventor had no idea what was looming over him. "You're about to get a taste of your medicine," Sam muttered through gritted teeth. The claw slammed down around the barrel. Sam pulled on a lever and raised it out of the sea. But time was running out. He could feel the cold water rising up against his legs. "Sam!" Fernando's crying was urgent. "You must leave now." Sam began to swing his catch over to the sea wolf. He was going to deliver Septimus neatly onto the deck. The barrel was almost over the rail when the door opened in its side, arms waving like a windmill. Septimus went tumbling into the sea. "No!" yelled Sam. A shudder ran through the octopode, throwing Sam to the floor. He looked up to see the water gushing down through the open jaws. Septimus's monster was sinking, and it was taking him with it. He plunged off the foredeck into the swirling currents, fighting to get to the ladder. At last he had it in his grasp. He pulled himself onto it, bending his head against the force of the cascading torrent. It was all he could do. It was all he could do to not be washed away. He thrust his hand up to the next rung, and the next. He could do this. Blinded by the deluge, he had no idea how near he was to the hatch, but he couldn't be far away now. But no matter how fast he climbed, the water was rising faster. It reached his chest, now his neck. He sucked in a deep breath as he was engulfed in the dark, salty flood. He yanked hard on the rope ladder, and to his horror, he felt it go loose in his hands. It had broken away. He tried to kick upwards towards the jaws, but the octopode lurched suddenly, and he felt himself turning over and over. He had completely lost his bearings. Sam thrashed about in the water, trying to get to the opening. His chest was hurting as his lungs cried out for air. He was good at holding his breath, but up until now he had always been in a game in a swimming pool in Backwater Bay. This was deadly serious. If he didn't find the hatch soon, he'd drown. Something knocked against his shoulder. Sam reached out and touched a human foot. He recoiled in horror. There was a dead body right next to him. Cold hands were grabbing at his jerkin. Was this a nightmare? Had he gone to Davy Jones' locker, where skeletal pirates preyed on drowned bodies? He fought himself free. He felt the hands clutching at him again. Now they had him under the arms. They seemed to be pulling him down through the swirling ocean, down into the depths of the seabed. There was nothing he could do. He closed his eyes. His whole body was aching, and he knew he couldn't last much longer without oxygen. He'd have to take a breath, and as soon as he did, his lungs would fill with water. He was going to die. Chapter 13. Sam took a huge gulping breath. He waited for the cold water to rush into his lungs. Instead, he felt clean, fresh air surging into his body. He could hear men shouting and seagulls screeching overhead. He opened his eyes and found himself staring at Fernando. That had been no skeleton attack. His friend had dived back into the octopode and saved his life. Now they were floating on the surface, and above them rose the massive hull of the sea wolf. "I've got him!" yelled Fernando to the watching crew. "Haul us up!" Before he knew what was happening, Sam found himself on the deck, surrounded by his cheering shipmates. Crow flapped down onto his head, and Charlie flung her arms around his neck. "Well done, Sam," she exclaimed. "The men of the Truro told us what you did as soon as they came aboard. You're a hero." She backed off, grinning. "A very wet hero." "Fernando's a hero too," said Sam. "I'd have drowned if it hadn't been for him." "Well, as you couldn't bear to leave the octopode, I thought I'd better drag you out," laughed Fernando, untying the rescue rope from around his waist. "I dived down and plucked you up. It would have been a lot easier if you hadn't put up such a fight, though. We never thought to see either of you again after you were swallowed up by that monster," said Ben. "And it wasn't a monster after all," said Charlie, her eyes wide. "Captain Drebennick's been telling us about Septimus Grind's fiendish underwater contraption and what he planned to do to us." "Aye," said Ned. "We felt something strike the ship, but we'd no notion it was something so deadly as a drill. You saved us from being scuppered." "Give him a medal," squawked Crow. "We're proud of you both, lads," said Harry Hop, patting him on the back. "And me and my crew are grateful," agreed Captain Trebennick. "We owe you our lives." "Anyone would have done the same," murmured Sam. He felt as if his brain had been washed away and seaweed left in its place. But something was niggling at him. He was sure he had some unfinished business. "Septimus!" he cried suddenly. "I tried to catch him with the octopode's claw, but I think he got away." "Oh, no, he didn't," came a deep voice. The crowd parted, and Sam could see Captain Blade, one hand holding a heavy sack, and the other clasping the bedraggled figure of Septimus Grind. Septimus still had his hat on. It was rammed fairly onto his head. The fool nearly drowned. He wouldn't let go of his treasure. Sam punched the air in delight. "But how?" he began. "Simple," said Charlie. "We saw the little sprat flapping about in the sea and fished him out. Didn't seem fair to leave the poor thing to the mercy of the sharks," added Ben with a grin. "Us pirates are all heart," said Ned. "What about his men?" asked Sam. "Did they get rescued?" "Aye, lad," said Harry Hop, jerking a thumb over his shoulder. "And they're under the fiercest guard we've got." Cratchit and Fry were huddled together under the main mast. Sinbad, the ship's cat, sat staring at them, flexing his claws. "They won't be moving in a hurry," laughed Charlie. "Never mind them," Septimus stamped his foot. "Unhand me this instant. I am the great Septimus Grind. Do you not recognise me?" His blade scratched his head. "Can't say that I do," he said calmly. "But, by the stars, I recognise a scoundrel when I see one." "Scoundrel?" squeaked Septimus. "I am no scoundrel. I am the greatest inventor the world has ever known. My name shall live forever." "You're wrong there," thought Sam. "No one's heard of you in the 21st century." "You think you've beaten me, you ignorant fools," Septimus ranted on. "But you have not. I will make my escape, I'm sure of that, and I will build a whole fleet of octopodes. The Caribbean will be mine, and after that, the world." "Well, stick my sardines in a saucepan," laughed Ned. "The man's as mad as a March hare." Septimus was pulling at his damp jacket. "I have the construction plans hidden here." He frantically searched his pockets. "Where are they?" he yelped. "Who has stolen them from me?" Sam peered over the side of the ship. Pieces of paper were slowly bobbing away on the waves. "Do you mean those construction plans?" he asked helpfully. Septimus looked out over the sea. "My plans!" he wailed. Then, as he watched the ocean rise and fall, his face went green. "Seasick?" he groaned, clapping his hand to his mouth. Peter whipped Septimus's hat off and held it out for him just in time. Meanwhile, Blade emptied the contents of the sack onto the deck. Everyone gasped in admiration at the silver goblets, gold coins, and sparkling jewels. Harry Hop rubbed his hands. "We've got a good haul here, Captain." "Aye," said Blade, "but it's not ours to keep." There was a muttering amongst the Seawolf men. "Why not?" protested Ben. "You're not going to give it back to that madman, are you?" "Grind took it from the Truro," Captain Blade told the crew. "Usually it's finders keepers, but today there are men here who fought bravely, and they have a greater need for it than we do." "There's more than enough here to buy our new ship," said Trebennick. "I insist we share it between the two crews by a way of thanks." Blade nodded, and the captains solemnly shook hands. "We'll put you ashore in Port Royal," said Harry Hop. "There's many a good vessel to be bought there." "What of Grind and his men?" asked George Lydgate. "What will their punishment be?" "They deserve to walk the plank." Trebennick turned to his first mate. "We can have a think about that," he said. "I'm tempted to keep the scoundrels on our crew. Cratchit and Fry are strong, and I can't think of a worse punishment for that landlubber Grind than making him suffer from seasickness all his days. And if he ever manages to cope with life, he can invent ways to make our ship go like the wind." "I'll warrant he will not be inventing anything like his octopus contraption again," said Harry Hop, "making a craft that goes under water. The man is indeed mad." "Aye to that," chorused the crew. Sam hid his smile. He couldn't tell them that in his time there were submarines all over the ocean. His shipmates would think he was mad. "Set sail for Port Royal," ordered Blade. "Ben, break out the rum. We'll have a toast to celebrate." Sam suddenly felt a tingling in his fingers and toes. He knew what that meant. He was about to return to the future. He was sorry to leave his friends, but he didn't mind missing the rum. It tasted like toilet cleaner, and one sip made him feel as if his head was going to explode. With a secret wave to Charlie, he ducked down out of sight so that no one would see him disappear. He felt himself being sucked into the familiar dark tunnel and deposited back into his bedroom, dripping salt water all over his carpet. He looked down at his jeans and t-shirt. His mum would not be pleased if she could see the state that they were in now. He didn't think that she'd believe him if he said that he'd accidentally fallen in the bath. He tore them off and went to stuff them under his bed. Then he remembered his doubloon. He wasn't going to leave it in his pocket this time and risk losing it in the wash machine again. He took it out and stowed it safely back in the old bottle. Now he could be sure of going back to the Sea Wolf and all of his friends for another amazing pirate adventure. And there we have it. I was getting a little bit tongue-tied reading this one. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Sam Silver and the Sea Monster. See ya. Bye-bye.